On the 6th of May, 2024, at the University of Amsterdam, student protesters dismantled their university brick by brick. These protests were fueled by the mass arrest that took place at Columbia University, where students felt discomfort with their institution's support of the occupation of Gaza. At the least possible estimate, 45,000 Palestinians have died. These students did not take apart the university brick by brick as an act of vandalism, but as a bigger global narrative of human rights protection. The Israeli occupation has led to forced disappearances, killings, torture of Palestinians, according to the United Nations. However, students all across the world have taken a stand. These demonstrations fueled protests all across the globe, from the States, Europe, Canada, and Australia. However, over 2,000 kilometers away from Gaza, people still took a stand. Now, over 3,000 kilometers away from the Netherlands, in Afghanistan, women are living under dystopian reality. The Taliban's takeover of February of 2020, after the US pullout, has led to grave humanitarian abuses. In fact, the UN Security Council describes it as the 21st century worst humanitarian abuse. The Taliban have denied women the right to education, the right to work, the right to freely leave their homes, ultimately isolating them from society and everything that they once knew and loved. As a result, women have had to work within the system against the very system they live in. The Bacha Push are not a cultural adaptation, but a form of resistance born out of necessity. The Bacha Push are biologically assigned women who dress up as males, change their hair, change their looks, change their names in order to fit the stereotypical norms of what it means to be a male, because they can then go access an education, access a job in order to help their families. Given the Taliban's takeover, Afghanistan has been facing a severe economic crisis, and families with only women, only daughters, are further suffering. As a result, my own family members have had to assign one daughter to change her name, change her looks, to be able to provide for them. This phenomena is nothing new, and it has been used throughout centuries, throughout decades. The Bacha Push serve an example how brick by brick women have to deconstruct their identities, and the Netherlands serves as an example of how brick by brick students and individuals all across the world take a stand in the face of human rights resistance, rights abuses. This is because when governments and NGOs fail to account for our best interests, it falls upon us, the people, those with the unexpected forms of power, to subvert the status quo. Paul Blackstock describes subversion as shifting the public consensus in order to create a change, often through the arts, literature, satirical comedy, and the list goes on. Subversion refers to changing society for a better new world. Subversion aims to undermine hierarchies and systems of powers that limit us, exploit us, and mistreat us. However, subversion is often assumed to be limited to only protests, as it often has that connotation, but it is more about the bigger narrative, where a protest may aim to dismantle a single policy issue or societal issue. Subversion aims to undermine the status quo, the system as a whole. Subversion often has a negative connotation, where governments often associate subversion with treason, contributing to its negative connotation. And it's often been conjured images as radical action and vengeance and violence. However, that is not true. And I'm not asking you to be that, and I'm sure you guys don't want to. But subversion, rather, is a peaceful demonstration, a gradual shift in society to make it a world where everyone is welcome, where everyone's rights and values are protected. It's nothing new. In fact, it has been used by the very country we live in today. Subversion has been used, especially during the communist regime, such as by Václav Havel. Václav Havel, a playwright and dissident, employed subversion through his essays and literary works to gradually shift the culture during Czechoslovakia, where the communist regime oppressed people and their rights, their voices, and aimed to dismantle the system of oppression.
Václav Havel's work gradually shifted these norms that the communist regime enforced on the people. Through his work, he influenced the peaceful Velvet Revolution, showcasing the importance of subversion around the world and even the country we're in today. Subversion has also been used by Nelson Mandela, a very iconic individual in history, who used subversion to end apartheid's grip on people and the colonial rule at the time. As an activist and later as a political leader, Mandela used subversion to protect human rights, protect people's voices that were once denied of them. And so both these individuals show us that subversion is not something aggressive or violent, but it's something that has influenced individuals all over the world, and maybe even you. It's important to acknowledge that we don't need to dismantle a whole government in order to be subversive. However, I can give you examples of how I have been subversive as a student, not as a president, and so on, by addressing issues within my very institution. Throughout the years I've been in high school, from 9th to 12th grade, I have demonstrated subversive actions by, for instance, addressing issues such as racism and misogyny within our school community. I did this by sending letters to our school administration to confront them of these issues and give them approaches on how they can confront this cultural violence that persists in our community. I have done this by standing here today at multiple student gatherings, even if, let's face it, they were tired of hearing from me, to talk about issues such as women's rights and how we can further protect them. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I did feel uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable that I had to stand in front of my peers who may have gossiped behind my back, thinking I'm some radical feminist and I am taking all these assumptions and making them feel uncomfortable by addressing these issues to them in a moment where they didn't want to discuss it and rather watch other videos about our school community. But that's exactly what subversion is. It's about addressing the discomfort within an audience, even when they may not want to hear about it. The struggles of Afghanistan or the struggles of Palestine in the Netherlands, for instance, might seem very distant, but they're a part of the bigger global narrative that we have to take part in. A single human rights abuse is like a dark stain on a white cloth. As it spreads, it slowly weakens the fabrics of society. Or how, like, a single girl's right to education is denied. This means that not a single woman's right to education is truly guaranteed. Not even mine, not even my cousins back in Afghanistan, and maybe not even you. This tells us that we need to be subversive. We have to have empathy and compassion for others and implement that in actions that we can take. It is a false assumption that simply because we care for others, we can make a change. But subversion refers to taking that compassion and putting into building blocks to create action, to create change, because subversion is a challenge to someone else's apathy. When I was younger, a ninth grader, I was often told that I was too aggressive or tough because I felt that others did not care as much about human rights as I did, or that I didn't understand why people weren't addressing these issues as frequently as I was. But now, as a senior, I've realized that subversion is a blend of both empathy, compassion, and action, and that through these shifts, through these steps, we can shift everyone's minds, and not only my own or my peers. Both in Palestine and the Netherlands, students and Palestinians have had to subvert the systems that oppress them. And both in Afghanistan, women had to reconstruct, take apart their identities brick by brick. This is because subversion leads to an unstable equilibrium, because we need to change the one we live in now. This might seem pretty insane to you if you know a few topics about ESS in our school, but this means that we live in a society that does not fully guarantee human rights. We live in a society that allows these systems and relationships that are wrong to continue persisting. Once we gradually employ subversion, such as Václav Havel, Nelson Mandela, or even my subtle works, changing the discourse, allowing discomfort to continue, it's inevitable that we may face discomfort and those around us. However, By being subversive, we will change that equilibrium, leading to spikes in the stable state, leading to a new equilibrium, a new environment in which human rights are truly guaranteed and valued. Subversion leads to the shift in mindsets. It leads to the shift in culture. It leads to the shift in the way that you live and continue on in the world. However, in order to address human rights violations, we cannot act on it unless we're faced with discomfort. Thank you.